Hey guys, welcome to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Jay. I'm a first-year medical student at the Mayo Clinic, Arizona campus, and today I want to share with you a few things that I think you should ask yourself before you are able to choose the best medical school for yourself. Whether you're currently a pre-medical student trying to create your list of medical schools to apply to, or you have currently been accepted and you have multiple acceptances and you're trying to decide where should I go to medical school, which school should I pick, I know it can feel super stressful, but I am going to share with you today a few things, a few questions that you can ask yourself to figure out what your values are and what is the right school for you. So here are the 7 things you need to be thinking about. Number 1, location. So this is a pretty simple one, right? So personally, I like to think first about the seasons. Do I like warm weather? Do I like cold weather? Do I like having seasons? Personally, I really love warm weather. I want it to be warm all year round, and that's why I ended up in Arizona, where it's basically 80 degrees all the time and then 120 degrees in the summer. So I can go to the hot tub, I can go to the pool even when it's December. So that's one thing you need to think about. I personally don't like being in gloomy weather because I know that impacts my mood and how I feel and whether I want to study or not. So weather is something to think about. After that, I want you to think about, do you like to live in a city? Are you used to living in a city where there's a lot of maybe public transportation, where you can walk to a lot of different things, where there's a lot of variety? Or are you more of a person that likes the suburbs or somewhere more rural, where you like driving around, where you like more of a peaceful atmosphere and it feels more like a suburb and a homey vibe rather than somewhere like a big city? And finally, when it comes to location, I want you to think about, do I want to be close to my family? Do you want to be somewhere in the same place so you can see them every day or every weekend? Do you want to be in driving distance, or do you want to be as far away as possible so you don't have to see them and they don't interrupt your studies? Now that's totally up to you and what you want to do, but think about location. Number 2, the grading system. Now, I know a lot of medical schools today have passed from a grading system to a pass-fail system, especially during their first and second year, and then third and fourth year are almost always graded or have some type of ranking or scale. So think about this. Do you want to go to a medical school that has a pass-fail system? You know, you need to get 70% and then you pass no matter what. You don't have to stress about every single detail and getting 100% on an exam. Or maybe you thrive better in a competitive environment. So you do want to go to a school that has a grading system of pass, high pass, honors, and so on. So think about where you thrive. Personally, I love pass-fail systems because it allows me to study, pass my exams, pass my classes, but at the same time focus on other important things in medicine, like actually shadowing or volunteering or starting new organizations and getting involved in those things that I'm passionate in for medicine. Number 3. Now, this is something I really didn't focus on or even reflect on when I was applying to medical school, but curriculum. This is super important, and now I realize it now that I'm in medical school. Think about what the curriculum looks like. Does the school work on a blocked system where basically you take one subject for, let's say, 6 weeks or 8 weeks, you take a final exam, and then you move on to the next subject? So right now I am studying pharmacology and microbiology for 6 weeks. After that, I will be studying neuroscience for 6 weeks. And after that, I will be studying psychiatry for 6 weeks. So you're focusing on one subject at a time. Or do you prefer an integrated curriculum where you're basically learning a lot in different subjects all at the same time? You might be learning about breast cancer, but you're going to learn about the pharmacology, microbiology, the anatomy, and all of these subjects integrated into one over a long period of time. So think about how your brain works and what kind of a curriculum you might want to focus on. Now, also in terms of the curriculum, think about, does the school offer breaks in between their blocks? So if I have 6 weeks of anatomy, I take the exam, do I get a break in between my next block? Because this is really something important. Students need time off in between blocks in order to take a break, take a rest, reset, and then start over in the new block. So make sure that you're asking your schools or checking their websites to see if they offer breaks or if they just keep going and going and going and going with no really breaks in between blocks. And lastly, just the flexibility. My school is great. We get these opportunities to have very early on clinical exposure, go shadow in the hospital, get involved in volunteering and community service. So make sure if that's something that is important to you and you want that early clinical exposure, look for a school that integrates clinical exposure really early into first or second year of medical school rather than waiting until third or fourth year to begin that. Because with that, you can end up deciding on what specialty you're interested in pretty early on rather than waiting until third year and then stressing out about trying to match somewhere or not knowing what to do in the very last minute. Number 4, do you have a specific specialty interest already before even applying to medical school? Well, most people don't, but if you do, make sure that the institution that you are going to actually has some of those interests. So if you're really interested in being a cardiothoracic pediatric surgeon, make sure that there is some exposure to that field in whatever school you're going to end up in. Make sure that there's research, make sure that there's doctors that are doing that so you can shadow them. And on top of that, if you have a specialty interest in maybe pursuing a dual degree program like an MBA or an MPH, you should probably double check that that school has those programs if you want to pursue them. And finally, some institutions offer different types of tracks or electives. For example, some schools allow you to join a global health track that you will pursue longitudinally and take some classes in that specific interest, or maybe rural health. So if you have some specific interest in a track, pathway, specialty in medicine, make sure that the institution you're going to has some of those opportunities that you're looking for. All right, next we're going to talk about COVID because this is a completely new thing to this year. So something to reflect on about COVID and how it has impacted medical school education. So the first thing you should ask a medical school is, how are the classes being held? Will they continue being on Zoom? Will they start being in person? Will they be hybrid? And really think about how you learn best and if that school is going to suit your learning style moving forward, especially with coronavirus and the uncertainty of what is going to happen in the future. Another important thing is anatomy. A lot of schools during the pandemic did not allow students to go in and do anatomy dissections, to go in and do anatomy in person because of COVID exposure. So really think about schools that are going to accommodate you and actually offer anatomy in person, because that is an invaluable experience to actually learn from a real cadaver and see those structures, touch the structures, especially if you're interested in surgery, but also just for learning medicine in general. So double check with the school, ask them how they approached anatomy education during COVID and how they're planning to approach it moving forward in the future. Along those lines, are schools allowing their students to go in and shadow and observe in the hospital and get clinical experience very early on during their first and second year despite COVID? Now, some schools have completely forbidden their students to go in because they want to be safe, while other schools have allowed students to go in and shadow during COVID. So no matter what your values are, sit down, ask the school how they've approached COVID, think about what your value is and whether you want to go to that institution that will allow you to go into the hospital during COVID, or might be on the safer side and not allow you to go, but you know that it is for your safety. I would say finally, ask other medical students at those institutions that you're interested in, how has the administration dealt with COVID and transparency? Have they communicated very well with the student body? Have they allowed students to input into the decision-making process? And all of those things that come along with the uncertainty of COVID. And in number 6, we have school costs. Now, this is very important because I know that a lot of pre-medical and medical students end up in a lot of debt. So you have to ask yourself and ask these schools that you want to apply to or have been accepted to, where do they offer the most scholarships? Do they offer any scholarships? Will they cover your tuition? Do they offer free full ride scholarships for medical school? How much does it cost to live in the area of that medical school? Because I'm sure living in New York City is going to cost a lot more than living in Kansas City. So these are all things that you need to be thinking about, especially when it comes to debt for the future and covering those costs. Now, again, I know that not a lot of schools offer full tuition rides, so you need to make sure that you're looking for your own scholarship opportunities. I will put a link of some of my old videos talking about scholarships, how to find them, how to apply to them, and some of the best scholarships that are currently being offered that you can apply to cover some of your expenses, whether you're a pre-med student or a med student. And finally, number 7, which I think is the most important criteria, is the vibe. And what I mean by this is we focus a lot on cost and so many other things, but to me, what has been the most important thing is the vibe. Where I have interviewed, where I have interacted with other students, with faculty, where have I felt the most at home? Where has my gut told me that I feel good being in this particular institution? And where do I feel valued? Another thing is I can talk to all of these other medical students that are attending specific schools and just observe and see which students are the happiest. I know you don't want to go into debt, but think about this. You're going to be at an institution for the next 4 years of your life. Now, some people are willing to sacrifice and just go anywhere that will give them a full ride, which is totally understandable. And if that's your value and that's your perspective, then please go for that. But if at the same time you value your happiness, want to make sure that you're comfortable, that you're getting the best education for your personal learning style and thriving in a specific environment, make sure that you are observing how other medical students there are interacting, whether they're happy, whether they're focusing on their well-being and they have time for themselves, as well as balancing family and school and working out and baking and whatever their hobbies are. So focus on the vibe. And there we have it, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Those were the 7 things that I think we need to reflect on when we're applying to medical school, trying to pick a school that is right for us and our values. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.